Over the past couple of weeks, I've been doing a little bit more coverage of the political situation that we're facing in this country and giving my opinion and tips on what that means for us from a personal finance and investing point of view. Now, I'm a qualified financial advisor, mortgage advisor. I've worked in retail banking, corporate banking, and wealth management for the last 15 years. That is my area of expertise. I am not an economist. And so in this video, I'm going to be reacting to another video on YouTube right now, which I'm going to link down below by Gary Stevenson. Now, if you don't know who Gary Stevenson is, he is a economist. He is and was one of the most successful traders in London. He is a millionaire on his own right, and he's been on this channel and he's been on my podcast talking about wealth inequality. He campaigns for wealth equality right now. And in this video that we're going to be watching in a moment, that I'm going to react to, he is going to outline one of the fundamental things that is crucial that we all get behind, particularly with the prospect of a general election coming up soon, either in the immediate or near future, or in the next 2 years, where it looks like Keir Starmer is going to be leading Labour into number 10. Now, this video is designed to be thought-provoking. And look, leave your comments, your thoughts in the comment section below around some of the content here. This is a great place for debate. And this is definitely a really great topic to debate about. But please pay attention if you're not already following Gary. His channel is called Gary Economics, and that handle is the same across Twitter, across Instagram. He is a really great guy, really, really down to earth. This will be very, very thought-provoking. Please pay attention, and I'll provide some commentary as we go through this.
So we're going to start with the first thing, which is the reverse of the budget. So you probably know there was a disaster budget a few weeks ago where the Conservative government tried to slash taxes massively for the richest. There's a video on the channel which you can go watch if you haven't seen about that budget. They've reversed nearly everything there. So look, people who watch the channel will know I was massively against that budget. So it's easy to think they reversed the budget. That's going to be fantastic until you see what it looks like they're going to replace the budget with. So it looks like they've moved basically to a new version of austerity, which means cutting budgets for public services, education, healthcare, local services, police. Now, these are all things which have already had their budgets cut massively in the austerity government from 2010. So if we cut these things again, we're basically looking at a situation where there's pretty much nothing left to cut. You are cutting into the bone here. So if we move into an austerity situation, you're talking about basically dismantling the basic services that allow this country to function. Dismantling the police, dismantling the schools, dismantling the NHS, totally getting rid of local services. This is already at a time when ordinary families are really struggling. I don't think I really need to get into the details of what this will mean for ordinary families, what it will mean for you, for your community, for your family. If this happens, it will have a devastating impact. Not only that, but it will mean more job cuts for people who work in public services. That will mean more people competing for the existing jobs. It will mean wages will probably fall or struggle to rise, definitely struggle to rise with inflation. So less money in your pocket, less money going around the economy. Yeah, more collapse. It's a disaster, basically. I want to talk a little bit about why that has happened, why we've moved from a situation of let's cut taxes on rich people to instead let's cut public services. This has happened because a space has been opened up in the narrative saying, oh, it's not possible to cut tax on rich people because the markets won't accept it, which essentially means we cannot borrow that amount of money. And we have then gone automatically back to the previous sort of narrative framework of, well, then we have to have austerity. Now, this is only possible because the alternative option of instead, let's tax rich and very rich people more, has basically been completely removed from the conversation. Now, people who follow this channel will know that the last 3 years have seen the biggest and fastest ever increase in wealth of the rich and the super rich. The average rich person increased their wealth by 22% in the first year of COVID alone. The average billionaire increased their wealth by 620 million in the first year of COVID. The total amount of of money that has gone from the government to the rich is £600 billion, which would be £12,000 for every adult in the country. So we are in a space here where the government has effectively transferred an enormous amount of money to the rich. If we were to tax that back, we could give it to you, we could cut your taxes, we could improve a living standard for ordinary people.
Okay, so look, this is something that Gary is very, very passionate about, and I agree with to a certain extent. Now, I know that there are different types of people that watch this account, and many people will talk about the fact that you cannot tax the rich, so on and so forth. Gary has a lot of very, very good videos on his channel where he talks about why that is not necessarily true, and there are mechanisms that you could put in place to tax the rich from wealth that is being held at this point in time. Now, this is a contentious subject, right? Because let's face it, everyone will argue that people work really, really hard to acquire the wealth that they do. People work really, really hard to build businesses and get to the position that they do in life. However, when you get into a situation where you're looking at a government that needs to make further austerity cuts because of the situation that we're in right now, and there has been such a massive wealth transfer through COVID, you start to ask the question of, is this something that should be put on the table from a political point of view? Now, this is something that has happened historically within politics, and I think we saw that with, the last general election. Jeremy Corbyn led with this kind of stuff, taxing the rich a little bit more. It didn't win him the election. Whether that was the only thing that didn't win him the election is up for debate, right? But Gary is making an important point here. The reason why the mini budget didn't work and there was such a backlash against the mini budget was because of the fact that the books didn't balance, right? What we were saying is we wanted to borrow more money to get, obviously, help with energy cost, £150 billion to start off with, right? But then at the same time, we're offering tax cuts, 45p at the 45p tax rate, which would have benefited the highest earners in the country. Now, there is the argument that this would have helped investment into the country, so on and so forth. Yes, maybe it would have done. However, with that now being repealed by Jeremy Hunt, what it's led to is we need to balance the book. And in such desperate times, what is going, or what has been or would have been proposed, depending on what happens with Rishi Sunak this week and the new leader of the Conservative Party this week, is further cuts to a system that, as Gary's already said here, has already been cut quite extensively through 2010, really up until now. So taxing the wealthiest becomes something that, from a political point of view, shouldn't be off the agenda.
We wouldn't have to cut public services, but unfortunately, this is just totally not in the conversation right now. Nobody's talking about taxing rich people. And if we allow that to be the main frame of debate, then we end up in a situation where the only alternative is cutting public services. So,
and can I just remind everyone who is watching this, he is a millionaire. He made his millions trading in the city, making bets on what the economy was going to do next. That's how Gary has made his money. So he's not someone who isn't a millionaire advocating for millionaires to be taxed more. No, he is a millionaire. He's actually among a very small number of millionaires who actually wrote to Rishi Sunak, I think it was last year or so, asking to be taxed more. So he's in that bracket where he qualifies as a millionaire himself, and he believes that he should be taxed even more in the help of other people who are not at his income level or his tax bracket at this point.
I think this really emphasizes how important it is that we do not let them ignore this possibility. Look, at the same time as ordinary families are literally struggling to eat, we have seen the biggest and fastest ever historic increase in millionaire and billionaire wealth. We need to get taxing rich people into the conversation.
I'm going to shift now to the bit where he talks about the potential and the possibility, the real possibility that Labour is going to win the next general election, and why this conversation around taxing wealthy people, or at least introducing some kind of tax, is something that is a good idea. And interestingly, what he is being told from people in Labour who he's been speaking to.
Now, anyone who watches this channel will know that I've not been a big supporter of the current Conservative government. And some people may have assumed from that means I'm a massive supporter of Labour. That's not really true. My situation is, if you do not do something about massively, rapidly increasing wealth inequality, you are going to decimate living standards of ordinary people, and ordinary people are going to lose their wealth. They are going to suck the wealth out of the middle class of this country. But it has become increasingly obvious to me in the last few months that Labour is very, very likely to come into government before too long. So I went to the Labour Party conference, and I've been getting contacted by some Labour MPs, and I've been reaching out to them to try and speak with Labour MPs basically to see, is there a possibility that they are going to increase tax on very rich people? Because I think if we don't do that, it is inevitable that we'll have a disaster. And I have to tell you, honestly, the sense I'm getting from the people that I've spoken to is that Labour are not serious about significantly raising taxes on rich people. You know, I can't mention the people individually who I've been speaking to, but I spoke to some people recently about the prospect of raising a 1% wealth tax on wealth assets above £10 million. And even that doesn't look like we're going to get it. So, you know, you need to think about somebody with wealth above 10 million.
So it's interesting, this point, this suggestion that he's making here, a 1% tax increase on assets above 10 million pounds. Now, the question is, how would you implement that? Because the reality is a lot of wealthy people will live off, you know, things like income from investments, so on and so forth. So at what point, what mechanism do you use to implement that 1% increase on assets over 10 million pounds? That's not necessarily a straightforward answer. I'm not a tax specialist or anyone who understands the UK tax system to that level of detail to be able to pinpoint that. But in what he's about to say, it kind of makes a little bit more sense around his thinking around that, right? So let's just carry on listening.
£10 million, right? They make 3, 4, 5% on that every year. So all we're talking about is slowing down by a fraction the rate at which wealth inequality increases, and Labour at the moment does not seem serious about supporting it. So what does that mean? That means that realistically what is probably going to happen here is the Conservative government limps on for another couple of years. They get replaced by a Labour government. That Labour government doesn't understand the seriousness of reducing wealth inequality. So they raise taxes on rich people extremely slightly, and all that does is slow down the rate at which wealth inequality is increasing. Now, you probably don't need me to tell you that in the last few years, wealth inequality, which has been increasing for decades now, in the last years, it's gone massively accelerated the speed at which wealth inequality is increasing. At this point, if we don't do something very serious to stop that massive wealth transfer from ordinary families and from the government to the rich, before long, we will totally lose our middle class. And within a generation or two, we will become a very, very unequal country. If we don't take action on it, that is what's going to happen. It looks like Labour is not going to take serious enough action on it. What that means is Labour will get into power and they will oversee continual worsening in the economy. So
this is really, really important what he's saying there. I mean, he's spoken to people. This is the sense that he's actually getting. I'm going to skip forward to the reason why Labour, or according to the people that he's been speaking to, won't necessarily look at this as something that they would consider at the next general election.
But when I speak to them, they say to me, many of them, we would be happy to support a wealth tax, but we don't think it's a vote winner. We think it's going to lose us votes. We think people don't support it. To me, what that says to me is basically the importance of what we are trying to do here. If we don't deal with wealth inequality, the rich will get massively richer, ordinary families will lose their homes, they'll go further into debt, government services will be ultimately decimated, the country will become phenomenally unequal and living standards will collapse. And unless you watching this are very rich, that's you, your kids, your grandkids, your family, your communities, living standards collapsing, okay? You need to support higher tax on the richest. And you need to convince your friends, and you need to convince your family, and you need to convince your community. And, you know, over the next few weeks and months, we're going to do a series of videos explaining why it's important, and hopefully you can use that to understand it and to convince the people around you.
So I've just taken like a couple of snippets right there from Gary's video for you to listen to. I'm going to link it all down below. But I think ultimately what this boils down to is just I guess, an awareness of how we can influence government moving forward, particularly when we get into circumstances where we are seeing political and economic situations where we have rife, great inequality in society. Now, look, I'm all for capitalism. I am. And capitalism gives you the right to create something and actually benefit from that, and your children's children to be able to benefit from that. But at what point do we get the government to intervene when the gap between those at the top and those at the bottom become so far apart? I'm a big, big advocate for social mobility. And social mobility means that, yes, to a certain degree, you have to take ownership of your own situation. But in order to take ownership of your own situation, sometimes you need that leg up. And if we are going into a round of austerities where there's going to be further cuts, that leg up tends to disappear. So we need a way to be able to pull others up behind us, not get up there, then drop the ladder as we're progressing and climbing higher. We need to let that ladder down to allow others to move up the ladder and lubricate that whole social mobility aspect. So look, go follow Gary, go watch the full video. I'm going to link it down below. Again, I would love to know in the comment section, what are your thoughts? You may be in the corner of capitalism and say, leave the rich alone. I want to hear from you if you do. Why do you think that is? I agree with you to a certain extent, actually, but I do believe that we do need to help those who are less fortunate in society. That's it, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you during the rest of the week. We're going to find out very shortly who wins the Conservative contest.